Hey guys, tonight we travel to a Tuesday. But not just any Tuesday, a Tuesday where for some reason you can't sing. Not even a little chorus, not even a casual whistle. You're on a warm brick street in the middle of ancient Babylon where even the sound of the wind seems to have asked permission before passing by. The walls are covered in cuneiform symbols, and the smell of ripe dates mingles with the perfume of dry sand. Vendors murmur their offers, as if afraid to attract something with more than two ears. Yes, this is Babylon, where Tuesday's silence seems more ritual than coincidence. You probably wouldn't survive here if you were the type to sing in the shower. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to comment where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slowly through the city. The ground creaks beneath your worn leather sandals, and each step echoes as if you were in an abandoned temple. It is Tuesday, the day when sounds are ashamed. An old man sitting in front of a pottery shop seems to notice that you are about to whistle. He says nothing. He just frowns and shakes his head with ceremonial slowness, and you understand. The sound is not welcome today. As you walk past a fountain with stone fish and bubbling warm water, you begin to sense a pattern. The tents are set up as usual, but everything is slower. The blacksmith hammers with a pad between the hammer and the iron. The butcher pushes the meat away as if he doesn't want to disturb it. The baker whispers to the loaves, and then, without meaning to, a little boy across the street hums something, one of those simple tunes you might sing to calm a camel. The reaction is instantaneous. A woman covers her ears, a dog runs away barking, and the boy himself looks embarrassed. He hangs his head, mumbling an apology, as if he had cursed the entire street. You feel that shiver down your spine, not from fear, but from being in a place where rules are not meant to be broken, where Tuesday is sacred not because of a specific god, but because of something. Some say it was an ancient decree. Others swear it's just superstition. But there are those who remember one Tuesday when someone sang, and the river changed direction. Historians still debate whether this really happened or if it was just a coincidence that gained melody over time. And you start to think, maybe silence really does have a meaning here. In the central square there is a pedestal where a copper statue once stood. No one knows where it ended up. Some say it sang with the wind. Others say it was buried, to silence its cries. You approach, place your hand on the smooth stone, and it seems to vibrate slightly, as if it contained a whisper that has been trying to escape for centuries. An old man with ivory teeth approaches. He doesn't speak. He just points to the sky. A cloud slowly passes by, tracing the shape of an open mouth. Coincidence? Maybe, but you sense there's a logic here even if your ears can't quite grasp it. Around the corner a stall sells date sweets and fermented cheese. The vendor points to a sign that reads, "Chewing noises only on Tuesdays." You're not sure if it's a local joke or an official order, but you decide not to test it. At the end of the day, the sun melts behind the ziggurats, and instead of closing songs, you hear only the sound of footsteps leaving. Tuesday ends like this, with the world seeming to breathe easier because no one tried to sing. You wake up in Babylon again, but now your gaze rises. The sky is still, tinged with gold, and there is a pale moon hanging even under the sun. An interesting detail: the Babylonians did not count time the way you do. No calendar with Sundays and long holidays. Their time flowed with the mood of the moon, and for some reason that no one seems to want to explain out loud, the moon did. Not like singing on Tuesdays. You walk into a square where a huge stone disk marks the lunar cycles. It's beautiful, complex, and utterly useless if you haven't studied Babylonian mathematics for 10 years. But one thing stands out. The symbol for Tuesday, a square with 3 wavy lines, is slightly cracked, as if the stone itself is trying to whisper shh. Beside you, a young apprentice scribe studies the phases of the moon. He writes slowly but does not sing. You ask why. He answers with the naturalness of someone who was born knowing, because Tuesday is the day the moon closes its ears. And he goes back to writing. You smile, thinking it is just a poetic metaphor, but he stops, looks into your eyes and adds she listens more closely on that day and she remembers. You swallow hard. On an ancient mural, half erased by sand and time, there is a scene that catches the eye. A man with open arms, surrounded by sound waves carved like serpents. Above him, a glyph representing the lunar month, and what appears to be a large teardrop falling from the moon. Some scholars say it represents divine punishment for an out-of-tune singer. Others, more skeptical, suggest it may simply be a symbol of a delayed harvest. Historians still debate whether the mural was religious art or simply a political metaphor for social silence. You make your way to a small hanging garden, not the famous one but a smaller one made for meditation, and there, sitting on a worn rug, an elderly man is strumming a stringed instrument. But there is no sound. Yes, he is just moving his fingers in the air, as if he were playing a musical ghost. You ask him what he's doing. "I'm remembering a Monday song," he replies. "Tuesdays are not sung. Tuesdays are remembered." This phrase resonates within you, because suddenly everything makes sense. Tuesday, in this place, is not just any day. It is a portal, a threshold between what has been said and what should be forgotten, or at least kept quiet. You keep walking and notice that the houses have windows facing east, where the moon rises even during the day. It's as if the residents expect her to watch, silently, everything that happens. And if someone dares to sing, well, maybe the moon will remember. There is a local myth about a king who tried to decree festivals with music every Tuesday. The first week was a success. The second, a fire broke out for no reason. The third, all the harps mysteriously disappeared. The fourth, the king fell silent, forever. Some say the moon took his voice. Others think he just got the message, and you begin to understand too. Because there are places in the world where time speaks, but only if you stop singing. There, sitting on a stone step warmed by the morning sun, you hear nothing. But this absence is not empty. It is dense, almost musical in itself. A silence that vibrates like a note sustained for centuries. And you realize Tuesday in Babylon is not about censorship. It's about listening. It's the day no one sings. Because finally, everyone listens. You're back in the narrow streets, where the heat makes the air dance over the stones. The city looks like a chessboard of clay and smoke, and time drags on like an old dog. Today you decide to explore an older area, where the stones are more worn, the walls lower, and the stories denser. It's there that you hear whispers of what they called the Forgotten Temple. No one knows exactly where it is, but everyone has a version of what happened there. A man with a braided beard tells him in a voice thick with dust that on a distant Tuesday, a young priest was carried away by a melody. A new song never before sung in the stone halls. They said it was beautiful, long sad. So sad that even the birds sat down to listen, but at the end of the second verse, the ground shook. The columns shuddered like frightened old men. And then, an entire wall of the temple collapsed. No one died. But the entrance was buried, locked forever, as if the city itself wanted to bury the song. You spend the day trying to find the remains, a map, a rumor, a drawing on a board. And then, in an alley where even cats seem to snooze deeply, you find a forgotten staircase covered in roots and rocks. You go down. The air changes, it gets damp, and every step sounds like a drop in a distant bucket. Down below there are signs that someone has been there before you. Footprints, a partially melted candle, a ceramic jar with faded inscriptions, and at the back of the room a wall that is not a wall at all. It is a rampart of poorly stacked stones, as if someone had hurriedly closed a door. You touch it, cold, firm, but a crack lets something pass through. That's not light. It's sound, a hum maybe, or a note suspended in time. You can't tell, you whisper, "Is anyone there?" And the answer comes in the form of total silence. But a silence so absolute that it seems to have been placed there on purpose, as a barrier against sound. According to some accounts, rare and always told with averted eyes, that temple was dedicated to a god of the interval, not of time, but of the sound between sounds. And singing there, especially on a Tuesday, was like pressing a wrong button in the universe. Historians still debate whether this temple really existed, or whether it was just an ancient metaphor about the dangers of musical vanity. After all, composing a new song was considered daring, and singing on an inappropriate day heresy. You walk away slowly. The stairs seem longer as you climb, and when you emerge again into the yellow light of Babylon, you feel a weight less, or perhaps an echo more in your chest. You can't tell. At the end of the alley, a woman offers you dates covered in fig honey. You accept, and before leaving, she says, without looking directly at you, "Some notes were made never to be heard again." You don't answer, because it's Tuesday, and today even your breathing seems to apologize for making noise. You wake up to the smell of freshly crumpled papyrus, or maybe it's just ancient dust mixed with dried ink. Today you decide to visit the famous library of Nippur, one of those places where silence is not only welcomed, but patrolled with the intensity of an invisible guard dog. The structure is majestic, with intricately carved columns and ceilings so high that the sound of a sneeze must take half an hour to reach the ground. You walk slowly through the halls, where hundreds of clay tablets rest in carefully carved niches. Some record laws, others recipes, but the oldest, it is said, tells stories that cannot be read aloud. And this is where you hear about Ibgalu, a librarian known for doing the unthinkable. He would hum while he read. He didn't sing, he didn't recite, he just hummed, as if he were talking to words, and of course, he always did this on Tuesdays. It was his way of remembering what he read, says an archivist staring at a cracked board. Until one day someone heard it and then he stopped. You ask, "Have you stopped mumbling?" The archivist shrugs. It stopped showing up. The walls of this library hold more than just stories. They hold echoes, literally. There's a room where, if you blink long enough, you'll hear an ancient syllable rolling across the ceiling. Ash. Maybe. Or, no one knows the end of the word, because everyone always leaves before it's finished. In the far corner is a tablet famous among scholars, a list of words forbidden for use on Tuesdays. These are common words, the kind you wouldn't think twice about using on a Sunday. But on Tuesdays they took on a strange weight. Walk, mouth, laughter. Why? Historians still debate whether this was linguistic superstition or an attempt to avoid awakening the sleeping. Syllables. You find a dark wooden seat, worn with age. You sit down, and there, between columns of silence and tablets of memory, you open a small volume bound in goatskin. It is written in Sumerian, which you, of course, do not understand. But the margins are lined with little drawings, a man with his fingers over his lips and the symbol for Tuesday just above his head. You begin to notice a pattern. Tuesday is not just a day of silence. It is a reminder, a tacit agreement between the people and their words. Sound here is precious, and wasting it, even in a whisper, can be seen as an affront. At the end of the visit, you approach the counter where a new librarian stamps visitors. He holds your hand for a second longer than necessary, looks at you and says, "If you hear a name you don't recognize whispered in the wind, don't repeat it, especially if it's Tuesday." You nod silently and walk down the narrow street, leaving the silent wisdom of Nippur behind. Outside, the world seems louder, but only a little, because after today, even the sound of your own thoughts has come to seem like an act of boldness. You wake up earlier than usual. There's something in the air. Maybe it's the smell of roasted barley, or the feeling that the wind is blowing lower today. Deciding to explore beyond the walls of the main city, you head to a sacred field where wheat is said to grow in such straight lines that it looks like the gods drew it with rulers. There, among straw scarecrows tied with golden ribbon, you find an old priest named Erid Enlil. He is kneeling, his hands on the ground and his eyes turned to the sky. You approach him slowly and ask if you can keep him company. He doesn't respond with words. He just gestures for you to sit down, and the two of you stand there in silence, watching the field move like a still sea. After a few minutes, he finally speaks, almost as if he were narrating to the clouds. The song scares the spirit of the wheat. You smile, thinking it's just a poetic phrase, but he continues. Every Tuesday, the wheat listens. It needs calm. If someone sings on that day, the spirit hides, and the grain is born without a soul. You ask how he knows this, and he tells the story of a dry season when a young farmer, ignorant of the traditions, whistled as he sowed his seed on a Tuesday. The seeds sprouted, but the stalks were crooked, the grains empty, and the bread made from that wheat made everyone sleepy for days. It was no ordinary sleep, says the priest. It was as if the body remembered the songs and wanted to forget. You try to argue, say that maybe it was just a bad harvest, bad weather, but he shakes his head. One does not sing to food on a listening day. Modern historians, of course, debate whether this was just an ancient way of enforcing agricultural discipline. Perhaps Tuesday was simply a day set aside for the countryside, to rest, or perhaps not. As you watch, you notice something curious. There are small bells strung around the field, but they are covered with pieces of fabric, tied carefully, as if someone had predicted that the wind would try to make music, and prevented it. You ask about it, and the priest smiles. Even the wind sings, if we let it. At the edge of the field, a young woman prepares small barley cakes. She offers you one. It is warm, soft, and tastes of anise. You thank her, and when you think of praising her out loud, she puts her finger to her mouth and smiles. A knowing smile, not a censuring one. At that moment you understand. Tuesday in this place does not prohibit sound. It honors silence, like someone who turns off the music to better hear their heart beating, or the rustling of the leaves talking to the ground. You walk back down the dirt path feeling a little lighter, like you left something there, or maybe heard something you didn't even know you were trying to hear. You're back on the streets of Babylon, but today your destination is the instrument market, a part of town where, oddly enough, all the shops are closed on Tuesdays. The windows are covered with thick fabrics, as if the sounds stored there need to sleep a little longer that day. But there is one exception. At the end of the lane, a lone tent stands open. It creaks softly in the wind, and a bell at the entrance swings. Without making a sound, inside, among piles of bone flutes, stretched leather drums, and harps with strings made of fine silk, stands a man named Lugalmu. He is old, wears glasses on a string, and looks as if he were born with his fingers already capable of tuning something. You approach, curious. He greets you with a smile, one of those silent ones that speaks louder than 1,000 songs. And then he says, "Did you know that one day I played a melody on Tuesdays?" You shake your head. He points to a flute with gold details. It was new, perfect. I made sure to play it as soon as I finished. It was Tuesday. I forgot. You ask what happened. He sighs. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's what scared me. The next day, customers stopped showing up. Neighbors began to avoid his tent. Children started crossing the street when they saw him. It wasn't anger, no fear. It was indifference. Social silence. I received 3 symbolic slaps, he explains. The first from a customer who returned a flute for no reason. The second from a colleague who stopped greeting me. The third from the wind, which blew past my door and made no noise at all. He smirks. They were soft slaps, but they hurt. You look around at the instruments. They are perfectly arranged, but they seem too quiet, as if they too have learned to respect the day. A sign hanging in the background reads, "Tuesday. Quiet maintenance only." And that's exactly what Lugalmu does. He cleans, tunes, aligns, all without playing a note. Historians debate whether this practice was a reflection of religious rules or simply a form of social control. Some suggest that ancient musicians cultivated weekly silence as a way to restore the sonic chai of their instruments. Others believe it was simply a collective fear of being misunderstood by local gods. You walk among the instruments, trying to resist the urge to blow a ceremonial flute. It smiles at you. Yes, you swear a flute smiled at you. But maybe it was just the reflection of light on the carved bronze. As you leave the tent, you notice something curious. The bell that had been swinging silently is now motionless, as if the presence of the sound had been recognized and calmed. You walk away, your steps lighter, as if the ground also wanted to play a note, but only tomorrow. You wake to the sound of coins hitting pottery, a dry, repetitive sound like a clay drum marking the beginning of another Tuesday in Babylon. But today your destination is less mystical and more administrative. You decide to visit the city's tax collection center, where scribes add up taxes with almost musical precision. The place is less imposing than you might imagine. A low brick structure, with hallways covered by linen awnings, and thin men counting in low voices. Except today. Today, no one counts in a loud voice at all. You approach a desk where a clerk with eyebrows as thick as the dust on the floor is stamping boards non-stop. He looks at you, scratches his chin and says, "Tuesday is the day for silence and debts." You laugh, thinking it's just a philosophical phrase, but then you realize that all payments are processed on this exact day, not Monday, not Wednesday, Tuesday. You ask, why? He points to a mural engraved with a figure with his hands over his ears, surrounded by flying coins. Below it is an ancient inscription. The sound distracts the scale. It sounds absurd, but there is a hidden logic there. Singing, speaking loudly, or even laughing while paying taxes was seen as a sign of disrespect. No to authority, but to balance. The act of transferring value was treated with the same solemnity as a religious ceremony. What if someone sings? You ask, he stops, looks around, then he says, "The sum changes, you don't understand." He explains, "We already had an incident. A collector hummed without realizing it. The amount of copper that was supposed to come in disappeared. It just didn't close." You ask if it could have been a miscalculation. He firmly denies it. The math was correct, but the sound shifted the numbers. Historians still debate whether this was simply a symbolic way of maintaining focus during bureaucratic activities, or whether there was a real belief that sound could affect objects. Some texts suggest that sound was considered a kind of living energy, capable of moving the weight of things, as if it were an invisible wind. In the corner of the room, an older man tends to the tributes in the form of merchandise, fabrics, spices, small bottles of oils. He organizes everything meticulously, in complete silence. And at the end of each count, he makes a small bow to the south, the direction from which, according to legend, the god of numbers came. You watch for a while. The movement is constant, but nothing seems urgent. As if everyone there knows that Tuesday is not a day to rush. It is a day of precision, a day to pause your voice so that the accounts speak for themselves. At the exit, there is a board nailed to the door. It's cracked at the top, but still readable. She says, "Whoever sings during the weighing opens the bag and closes the fortune." You don't know if this makes literal sense, but you feel that in Babylon, it's better not to pay to see, or rather, not to sing to see. Today you decide to go further, deeper, to a place that maps prefer to ignore, and locals only mention in hushed tones, the former Queen's Palace that, they say, still bears echoes of a Tuesday that got out of hand. The building is in ruins, of course. All that remains are columns stripped of color, patches of floor with faded designs, and walls that seem to listen more than reflect sound. You enter cautiously, as if you were stepping into a place that still has its own memory. There, right in the center of the main hall, there is a kind of altar, low of pale stone and full of marks that look like they were made by nervous fingers. Behind him, a veiled sculpture, the portrait of the former queen, kept there for centuries as a sign of respect and fear at the same time. According to legend, she was a woman of intense power and a strong voice. Literally. It is said that her voice could silence birds in mid-flight, and that one day she asked a court musician to compose a song in her honor. The performance was scheduled for a Tuesday. The musician hesitated. He warned about customs, but the queen insisted. After all, what could go wrong with a simple melody? That afternoon the song was sung. A harp, two voices, and a majestically broken silence, and then a window cracked, then another. A vase fell by itself. The flames of the lamps flickered, and according to reports, the statue of the queen herself, still alive at the time, shook. Some say it was the sound of the final note. Others claim it was her gaze that made the marble shudder. But the fact is, that night she was found motionless. Not dead, but different. As if she were in a trance. And she remained that way for days, without speaking, without eating, with a fixed, empty stare, as if she were listening to something that no one else could hear. You approach the covered sculpture. A piece of the veil has fallen away, and for a moment you swear you see the stone breathing, not moving, breathing. But maybe it's just the warm late afternoon breeze. Near the base of the altar there is a faded inscription. You need the help of light to read it. Let the living be silent on Tuesday, so that the dead do not rise to dance. Of course, this seems like just a metaphor, but you feel the hairs on your arms stand up anyway. Historians still debate whether this event was a poetic exaggeration by ancient scribes or whether something unusual actually happened that Tuesday. A small earthquake, perhaps, a coincidence in the weather, or a silence that was broken out of pride. You sit on the cold floor of the hall and close your eyes for a moment, and in that brief moment, you hear something, not words, but a murmur, as if someone were singing from beneath the earth, a voice without language, without direction, but with a tone that sticks in your bones. You open your eyes and there's no one. But you know you heard it, and he decides to leave slowly, without running, without talking. Because of all the Tuesdays, this is perhaps the one in which silence matters the most. You wake up to a different weight in the air, a thick silence, like a blanket that covers even the smallest sounds. Today, you decide to explore one of the lesser-known areas, not because it's not important, but because of what it holds, the ruins of an underground prison. The site is hidden behind a hill of red clay covered in undergrowth. The entrance is a narrow opening in the rock, guarded only by ravens that seem to have been on duty there since the time of kings. You descend with a lit torch, feeling the dampness rise up the walls and the floor creak beneath your footsteps. Inside, there are cells lined up, one next to the other, made of wooden bars hardened with resin. Each cell has a small hole carved into the stone. It is said that this is where the sound of the world entered, so that the prisoners would remember that it still existed. But there was a clear rule in this place. Prisoners were not allowed to sing on Tuesdays, not as punishment, but for protection. You find an ancient record carved into the wall of the deepest cell. It tells the story of a man named Agir, who was imprisoned for stealing sacred figs. He was known for singing every night. His melodies were soft, almost like prayers. But one Tuesday, out of boredom or desperation, he sang. The next morning, he was gone, no sign of escape. The food untouched, the cell locked from the inside. The guards remained silent about what had happened. Only one entry in the prison register. It disappeared between the notes. You read that sentence over and over again. Vanished among the notes. It's beautiful and scary. Some believe he found a kind of chink in time. Others suggest the chant echoed so loudly that it was returned to him with a call, and he followed the song to its end. More rational historians say he probably dug his way out and used superstition as a cover, but the floor around the cell is solid, like heat-sealed stone. Further on, there is a circular room. The ceiling has a small hole through which a strand of light comes in. The acoustics here are perfect. You almost feel as if you whispered, the sound would go around and come back, like a secret revealed. Hanging from a chain is a small bell. There is no explanation, no inscription, just the bell. You decide not to touch it, but as you watch, you notice something on the wall. Sheet music carved directly into the stone, simple, almost childlike melodies. And next to them, an inscription. Sing. On Thursdays, hum on Mondays, Tuesdays. Just listen. You wonder who did this. A prisoner? A guard? A lost poet? Before you leave, you hear something you can't quite place. A low, deep sound, almost like a distant choir. But when you turn around, you're alone. The torchlight dances on the walls, and the echoes are back, to just your own footsteps. On the way back up the hill, you look back one last time, and for a second, you get the impression that one of the cells is singing, not loudly, not with words, but with intent. You quicken your steps. Because even in Babylon, there are places where silence is the only sensible response. You wake up with a strange sensation, as if sounds had shapes, waves, angles, textures. Today, you head to a little visited but extremely curious place, the Whispering Stars Observatory. This is no ordinary observatory with telescopes or detailed sky maps. This one is sound. and it's tied to a peculiar story that begins with two astronomers, both of whom are deaf. Yes, two men who heard absolutely nothing, but who, curiously, used sound to discuss the sky. The site sits atop a lower ziggurat, built not for divine reverence but for worldly contemplation. Up there, where the wind dances most eagerly, you'll find etched designs in the ground depicting constellations, moons, and, most strikingly, musical notes. It's not exactly music as you know it, but an attempt to map the stars with sound. Legend has it that these two astronomers, Shuban and Abar, communicated through ritualistic chants that they learned from the movement of their lips and vibrations of the ground. They had differing opinions about a serpent-shaped constellation. One believed that it appeared to announce rains, the other, eclipses. Since they couldn't hear, they sang only to see who could disturb the sand first, with the vibration of their voice. It was a kind of silent sonic duel, and for many months no one emerged victorious. Then one Tuesday, Abar decided to try out a new melody, something he had dreamed up the night before, a wordless song made up only of long vowels. He sang, and the ziggurat shook. It didn't collapse, but it cracked, a discreet crack which ran along the ground like a shy snake. Shuban looked in astonishment, and even without hearing, he seemed to understand. Tuesday was not a day for sound. From that moment on, the observatory was left abandoned for a time. Abar disappeared. Shuban, they say, lived a few more years but never sang again, not even his soundless sounds. Historians still debate whether these men really existed or whether they are just symbols created to represent the union between science and superstition. But the drawings remain there, visible to this day. As you walk among the figures, you notice something. The constellations are connected by small grooves in the ground, and if you walk in time with them, your footsteps echo in a pattern. Almost as if you were activating an ancient instrument. You try it, 1, 2, 3. The sound changes slightly with each step, and then it stops, because it's Tuesday. And even now you feel like you've walked too far over the sound. Next to one of the columns, someone has carved a phrase in late Sumerian: "The stars sing softly on Tuesdays, and only fools answer." You smile, not out of mockery, but out of respect, because more and more everything seems to make sense. As you leave the observatory, the wind blows hard. It tries to sing, but you don't hear it, because today you only hear with your eyes. You wake up to the sound of nothing, a kind of nothing that only exists on Babylonian Tuesdays, when even the birds seem to walk instead of fly, as if avoiding the sound of beating wings. Your destination today? An ancient bakery, but not just any bakery. This one sits in the middle of an old residential district and holds a curious combination of secrets, recipes, and sheet music. The place, called House of Namu, is small, with a clay oven in the center and stone shelves full of boards, some with preparation instructions, others with musical symbols. Apparently, the ancient bakers were also composers, but not of great works. They made simple music to accompany the kneading of the dough or the fermentation time. You approach a man who appears to be the current guardian of the bakery. He wears a flower-stained apron and has the posture of someone who has seen more sunrises than new moons. He offers you a sweet bun, still warm, and you accept. It tastes of apricots and history. Curious about the musical tablets, you ask, "Did they sing while they made bread?" The man gives a small smile. "They did sing, yes, but never on a Tuesday." You ask why. He points to a cracked sign next to the oven which reads, "If you mix wheat and melody on Tuesday, the bread will not rise, and perhaps neither will you." An exaggerated superstition, perhaps. But he takes it seriously. He says that once a new boy in the bakery started humming while he kneaded the dough. It was a Tuesday. The bread didn't rise. That's okay. It happens. But then the boy, too, stopped rising, literally. He stayed the same, year after year, as if time had grown sour with him. Historians still debate whether these stories are just poetic ways of imposing discipline on the apprentices, or whether there was something deeper behind them, a kind of respect for the cadence of routine, for the silence that accompanies the preparation of food. As you chew slowly, You realize that there is indeed a rhythm to the room, but it is a silent rhythm. The baker kneads the dough with precise movements, the assistant takes the bread out of the oven with almost choreographed synchrony, and a boy sweeps the floor in time with something you can't hear but feel. And there, among the boards and flour, you find something unusual, a recipe engraved with sheet music. The name? Bread for Monday. But at the bottom, a warning. Never sing this song on the third day. The heat of the oven will remember. You laugh, not out of mockery, but out of respect. Because you begin to realize that this city doesn't fear sound, it just understands its weight. Before leaving, you watch the baker score a loaf of bread with a knife, a small crescent-shaped cut. You ask if it's just decoration. He replies, "It is to remind the wheat that the moon is watching." You return through the cobblestone streets feeling nourished, not only by the bread, but by a tradition whispered between fermentations and silences. Because here even the bread knows how to listen. Today you're heading to what remains of a sacred well, not one of those that sparkle in fairy tales, but a place shrouded in legends that no one likes to repeat out loud. It's said that it still responds, but only under one very specific condition: if someone dares to sing near it on a Tuesday. The path is narrow, flanked by ancient date palms that bend over, as if trying to hide what lies ahead. Ahead of you is the well. Low, its edges rounded by centuries of human touch. There are frayed ropes and a broken bucket, but what really catches your attention is the atmosphere around it. No insects buzzing, no leaves rustling. An eerie silence, tense. You walk to the edge and look out over the water. It's too still, too dark. And you remember what you heard from a scribe last week. The well sings back, but not with its voice. It's just a sentence, but it stays with you as you pick up a pebble and let it fall. Plug. The sound is subtle, but right after it, something comes. An echo. But not the plock. More like a scratching. A low, wet note. Unnatural. You pull away, but you can't resist. You murmur a word. Any word. Just to test it out. And then you hear it. A melody. Coming from deep inside. Not pretty. Not ugly. Just out of place, like someone was singing underwater, and not trying to communicate, just repeating, an imperfect imitation of your voice, an old recording going around in circles. You ask an old man who lives nearby if he knows what it was. He just shakes his head. Tuesday is the day the well listens, but it also remembers. If you sing, it answers you, with another Tuesday, one that has already passed. Historians differ on this account. Some believe that the well contains natural acoustic formations that generate distorted echoes. Others believe that the sound of the water and the stones contains voice impressions, a theory with no scientific basis but full of poetry. You spend the day watching. No one comes near the well, not the birds, not the shepherds, not the children who would normally love to throw stones there. In the afternoon, a light wind picks up, and for a moment it seems to bring with it a musical note. You are not sure if it is real or if your imagination has begun to collaborate with the legends, but then you notice on the stones around the well there are marks, like little grooves, and between them, repeated inscriptions, 3 waves, and then an open mouth, the symbol for Tuesdays and the symbol for sound. You walk away slowly, and as you walk away you have the feeling that the melody is still there inside, stuck, spinning. Before you're completely out of sight of the well, you turn around, just in case, and you swear, you really swear, that you heard your own name, whispered. By the echo. You wake up with the faint sensation that someone tried to sing in your dream, but the voice stopped mid-note. And today, by coincidence or fate, your path leads you to the ruins of the legendary hanging gardens of Babylon, the ones that many doubt ever really existed, but here they are, or what's left of them. The smell of forgotten vegetation still lingers in the air. Dry vines twine around broken columns, and tiny flowers sprout stubbornly between cracks in the stone. The sound here is naturally muffled, as if the earth absorbs any noise lovingly. But you know what you're looking for. Not plants, not hidden springs, but traces of something more unlikely. Music. According to ancient texts, palace gardeners, in addition to caring for the plants, composed melodies, little songs for watering, pruning, planting, everything done in harmony with nature. The notes were simple, repetitive, as if they were made to be sung with the breath of the winds. But there is a curious characteristic. None of these songs have an ending. Literally, the scores that were recovered always end. On Monday, you find one of these tablets under a collapsed structure. The text is clear up to halfway through, a sequence of instructions that mixes watering and intonation. 2 steps to the left, turn the watering can and chant Lulu May 3 times. And then silence, a blank space, and then never continue on Tuesday. You find other tablets with similar messages. Some almost look like drafts, as if someone had tried to extend the song, but always stopped at the same place, as if something or someone forbade the end. You ask a man who takes care of the maintenance of the place, an informal guide with the eyes of someone who has seen more than he is saying. He answers without hesitation. They were music for the plants, and Tuesday is the day the plants listen. You smile, finding the idea cute, but he continues. They listen and respond. You ask him what he means. He points to one of the moss-covered columns. There, carefully engraved, is a small piece of text that makes even the afternoon sun shiver. We tried to sing on Tuesday once. The garden grew too much, too fast, and then it withered forever. Historians dispute this account, of course. Some say it was simply a blight or a failure of irrigation. Others believe that the sounds chanted during cultivation influenced the behavior of the plants. But there are also those who argue that these songs were actually control mantras, and breaking the pattern was dangerous. You walk among the ruins and notice that the plants seem observant, not animated, but attentive. And, as you pass an old fig tree bed, you hear something soft, like the end of a song that never began, just one note. And you stop, doesn't sing. It does not continue. Because maybe some songs are not for our ears, but for the roots, and maybe Tuesday is the day when even the ground asks for silence. Today you wake up with the feeling that the world is whispering. But instead of words, there are sounds that never come out, as if everything around you were about to speak, but pulled back at the last moment. And it is in this state of unanswered listening that you arrive at a place little known even among the most ancient Babylonians, the Court of the Talking Stones. It is not an official name. The scribes called it Place of the Flat and Dark Earth. But the inhabitants, with that poetic sense that only silence produces, gave it this more curious name. The courtyard is a circle of smooth black flagstones, each irregularly shaped, as if someone had cut out a jigsaw puzzle from obsidian and then given up on putting it back together. They say these stones hold sounds. Not that they make noises like a shell pressed against your ear, but they respond in subtle ways, and only on Tuesdays. You sit in the center of the circle, where a larger stone, with scuff marks in the shape of 2 hands, seems to invite you to an ancient and forgotten ritual. You rest your palms against it. The surface is warm even in the shade, and then nothing happens, at least not right away. Little by little you feel a slight vibration, not exactly tactile, more like a shiver that doesn't pass through your skin, but through your memory. And then you notice something around you. The smaller stones are positioned as if they formed an instrument, a kind of primitive xylophone, but gigantic. You pick up a pebble and, with the care of someone who knows the world is listening, drop it onto one of the slabs. The sound is strange, not metallic, not rocky. It's like the sound of an idea being born but not yet spoken. You do it again on another rock and again. Each stone seems to have a note. But the most curious thing, the same pebble thrown on different days emits different sounds. And on Tuesdays the sound doesn't come back. He gets lost, absorbed, as if it were heard by something that decides to keep it. You find an inscription engraved in the center of the courtyard. It is in ancient Sumerian with traces almost erased by rain and time. On Tuesday, listen to the stones, for only they still remember what was said when the world was young. You close your eyes, and you start listening. Not with your ears. You already understood that doesn't work here. But with that inner part that hears silence, Memories of sounds you never made begin to surface. Laughter from other lives, echoes of languageless chants, the breathing of someone who perhaps once sat where you are. Some scholars believe that this place was used for ceremonies in which sound was returned to the world, a kind of sound recycling. Others think it was just an ancient acoustic experiment, trying to decipher how sound traveled through the stones. But there are those who swear that, on the right nights, the stones whisper the names of all those who dared to sing there on the wrong day. You stand up carefully. The central stone now feels colder, as if for a moment it has warmed up with your presence. You step away slowly, and before leaving the circle you look back, and there she is, a mouth-shaped crack in the stone at the entrance. Open, but it changes, because today is Tuesday, and here, even the stones talk, but only if you stay silent. Today, you don't wake up, you emerge, as if you had returned from a long dive into your own mind. Your feet touch the ground as if they were in another time, and perhaps they are. Because today's destination is the edge of the ancient city, where Babylon begins to blend into nothingness, a place called by a few and in very low voices, the end of murmur. There are no buildings here, no shadows, just a smooth plain, with flat rocks and dry hills that resemble the spine of a sleeping animal. You walk in silence. You wouldn't even try to speak, even if you wanted to. It's as if your throat knows that words would be a waste. On top of one of these hills is a dark stone marker. In it, a symbol repeated throughout the journey, 3 waves and a mouth. Tuesday, the sound, and something else. As you get closer, you see that the marker is deeply inscribed, arranged like stanzas, a song, but unfinished. All the lines end in abrupt cuts, as if the scribe's hand had stopped in mid-gesture. You hear footsteps behind you, but you don't turn around, because you already know there's no one there, or at least no one who needs feet to walk. When you touch the stone, you feel a slight vibration, different from other times. It doesn't come from the ground, it comes from inside you. And then you listen, not with your ears, but with the part of you inside that has always listened, even before you knew what listening was. It's a voice, or rather, a whisper. Low, thin, weakened by time, and she says, "The last voice of Babylon was mine." You freeze, because the voice sounds familiar, not like a specific memory, but like the feeling of a memory that is yet to happen. And then, she continues, "I sang to the sun, to the moon, to the rivers. I sang even when they told me not to sing, and Babylon fell silent. The wind stops, the light changes, and for the first time, the sound of one's own absence seems to make sense." Historians never mention this stone. Maybe they never found it. Maybe no one dared to go that far on a Tuesday. Maybe the final song was never written, because it was never meant to be heard. But there alone you feel that this voice is not a warning, nor a threat. It is a confession, from someone who could not resist the beauty of singing in a world that only wanted to listen. And you understand finally why the Babylonians avoided singing on Tuesday. It wasn't fear, it was respect. Respect for sound, for the memories it carries, for the things it can wake up, and that prefer to stay asleep. You walk away from the rock. The plain seems more serene, the silence more natural, and at the end of the trail, before disappearing from the landscape, you look back one last time. The stone is no longer there, or maybe it never was. You thought the journey was over, that you had seen all that Babylonian Tuesday had to offer. But as you walk back through the streets that now feel more like yours than ever, something catches your attention. A sound, almost imperceptible, a frequency too low to be a word, but too steady to ignore. You follow, because the sound invites. It comes from a narrow alley between 2 very old buildings, partially swallowed by sand and time. The walls are made of dry clay, full of cracks that look more like wrinkles, and a stone staircase descends to a basement that has not been shown on any map you have seen so far. Down below, there is a room, round. No windows, no doors other than the one you came through. The air is thick, as if it has been exhaled for generations and never changed. In the center sits a bowl made of polished black stone, resting on a tripod of woven wood. Inside it is water, still, pure, reflecting not the ceiling but something deeper, something that shouldn't be there. You come closer. The sound is louder now, but it is still not a sound. It is a presence, and then you see it. Engraved around the bowl in a spiral is a single phrase in archaic Sumerian that you have seen before but never completed. On Tuesday, the world listens with the ear you don't have. You don't understand right away, but you start to feel it, because there, around the bowl, the silence seems to listen to you, as if your every thought, even the smallest, is being recorded, not judged, not refuted, just noticed. You whisper without realizing it, a word, your name perhaps, or just a meaningless syllable, and immediately the surface of the water vibrates. Just once, but that's enough. She heard. You kneel down and look more closely. In the reflection you see not your face, but a field of wheat, a group of men walking in a circle, a child hiding behind a wall, a woman playing a stringless harp, and in the center of it all, someone stands, someone like you, or maybe you. On another Tuesday, on another Babylon, you turn your face away from the bowl. The sound fades, the air clears, the room feels smaller, more normal. And then you see next to the bowl a small block of clay with a red seal on it, the symbol of Tuesday. It is intact, as if no one had ever dared to break it. Next to it, another inscription. He who sings here will bring back something. That has already left, but that has never forgotten its path. You stand still, not out of fear, but out of respect. There are places where sound is a key, and keys sometimes open doors that shouldn't be reopened. Historians are unaware of the existence of this room, and perhaps that is for the best. Perhaps it is the silent heart of a people who understood something the rest of the world still struggles to comprehend. Sound shapes not only the air, but time, memory, and even destiny. You climb the stairs slowly. When you reach the light, from the surface the city is different, not in the details but in the rhythm, as if everything is now more aligned, as if you have finally tuned in to the pulse of Tuesday, and for the first time you understand that you no longer need to ask why the Babylonians didn't sing on Tuesday, because now you feel it. You've heard enough to believe that Tuesday is a sanctuary. But there's one last story, one that no one tells directly. It appears in fragments, in scribbles on less important clay tablets, in passages scratched in the margins of books. It's as if time itself is trying to hide this part. But you found it. It's called the First Sound Room. It is said to be buried beneath the oldest ziggurat in the city, so old that no one climbs it anymore, not even to pray. The guards say the structure is unstable, but you've probably noticed that in Babylon, unstable is just another word for forbidden. You walk around the ziggurat until you find a fissure between the stones, a narrow space that spirals down into history itself. The walls are unmarked. There are no torches, but somehow you see. The light seems to come from within the air. A pale glow, like concentrated silence. Down below, there is a door. Small, made of petrified wood, and in the center of it, a circular, opening not a lock, but a kind of filter, as if something or someone was waiting for a specific sound to open it. You come closer. The sound isn't there, but you feel like making one, maybe an ah, maybe a hum, nothing that can be understood, just emitted. But you hold back, because you didn't come here to sing. You came here to listen. The door opens. The room is round, simple, with walls that seem to pulse slowly as if they were breathing. In the center, a shallow platform with inscriptions far older than any you have seen. No modern symbols, no familiar words, just waves, curving lines, marks that seem to float, and then you listen, not with the ears, but with the spine. It's a note, unique, immense. That seems to come from nowhere, but that was already there before you were even born. A vibration that imposes no fear, nor peace, just presence. This is the first sound. Legend has it that it was sung by the gods when separating clay from water, when building the first walls, when lighting the first flame, and that since then has never been repeated, not by forgetfulness, but for wisdom. Because sound shapes, sound moves, sound creates, and singing on a Tuesday would be a way of trying to imitate him, of repeating the original sound. And that, in any world, would be too high a risk. You stand there in silence, allowing yourself to hear something that cannot be translated, only lived. Before leaving, you see on the floor an inscription that someone drew with their finger in the accumulated dust. Whoever sings here reconstructs what was forgotten, but loses what he knew. You don't sing, because today you understand that there is silence that is not absence, it is total presence, and that Babylonian Tuesday does not prohibit sound, it reveres it, it guards it, it remembers it. You rise to the surface, the sun begins to set. And the sound of the world slowly returns, a distant bird, a bucket of water, a vendor yawning. But inside you, the first sound remains, and you know you'll never be the same. You take a deep breath. Your feet are tired, but your mind is at rest. The wind blows slowly, as if it were rocking not your body, but the memories you took with you on this journey. And now everything seems to make sense. The warm brick streets, the silence of the squares, the notes that were never played, the melodies that only exist when they are not sung. It all comes together in a calm rhythm, like the pulse of the earth, beneath the feet of a forgotten city, but still alive. Tuesday ends, and with it, the sound slowly returns. First, the sigh of the wind among the leaves, then the rhythmic beating of a calming heart, and finally, the softest sound of all. Peaceful. Silence you lie down, not on stone nor on sand, but in the comfort of knowing that the world has places where even sound needs to sleep, and that there are days when the best music is the space between words. Close your eyes, let stories blend with dreams, and let time pass unhurriedly for tonight, because tomorrow you can sing again, but today it's still Tuesday, and the silence is perfect.